This is the GRP podcast where we talk about God, religion, and politics. And I'm your host, Hijabi Down Under.
Hey everyone, what if I told you that science proves that God exists? In today's episode, we're going to be talking about evolution, because for a lot of people, the theory of evolution is the reason that they doubt that God exists. You know, before Darwin came along, it was just a given. Everybody just kind of took it for granted that some being greater than us, or a higher power, you could say, brought us into existence. But what if I told you that in the next few minutes, it's going to become very clear to you that a close look at biology shows very clearly that there must be a higher intelligence that brought living things into existence? People get intimidated by this topic because the big science guys at the top say that evolution is true. And they're like, look, I don't have a PhD, I'm not a scientist. And so people feel that they can't really disagree. But look, I've studied biology at one of the top 100 universities in the world, and I'm going to show you that you don't really need to be a scientist or even have studied biology at university to understand evolution and judge it for yourself. Okay, so let's break down what evolution is. Evolution is the scientific theory that holds that all of life on Earth, all of the 8.7 million species that we've discovered so far on Earth, they all came about through random mutations and natural selection. But what does that mean? Look, first you need to understand what random mutations means. And in order to do that, you need to know what DNA is. Let's back up for a second though, okay? Every living thing that you know, a cat, a human, a cow, your pet dog, we're all made up of cells. And cells are kind of like tiny little building blocks. They're like the bricks that build a house or tiny little Lego pieces. And they're so small that you can't see them with the naked eye. You need a microscope to see them. And inside each of your cells is a tiny, tiny little molecule called DNA. This DNA is the code to building that particular living thing. So a cat has cat DNA, dogs have dog DNA, humans have human DNA, and so on. All right, so what do I mean by code? So if you're building a house, right, you usually start with a blueprint, right? So you design what the house is going to look like, the size and shape of the rooms, and then you have a plan of how to build the house, what materials you're going to use, and so on. Now, DNA is basically all of that. Inside each one of your cells is a tiny little molecule that has all of the instructions to build you. All of the instructions to build your eyes, your ears, your skin, your hair, everything is encoded in this tiny molecule. And not only that, it's not just the code, it actually starts the process of the building as well. So imagine if you had a blueprint for a house that then on autopilot built your house. So you just plant it in the ground and a few months later, the house has built itself. Okay? That is basically what DNA is. Now, each living thing has its own unique DNA, its own special plan for building that living thing. So humans, for example, have different DNA to cats. But also within the species, there's small variations in the DNA that make you a unique individual. Now, mutations are basically spelling mistakes in the DNA. So when DNA is replicated inside your cells, you have small spelling mistakes in the instructions. And these can be carried over to your offspring. So evolution claims that all of the different living things we have, all of the different species, came about because of a buildup of these spelling mistakes. And then some of them proved useful and were preserved because the living thing that had that change in their DNA or mutation had a better chance of surviving and passing along their genes to the next generation. So that's called natural selection. And over a very long time, millions of years, this created a variety of new species. All right, so if that doesn't make sense, don't worry. I'm going to give you an example of natural selection. Let's say there's a moth called Billy, okay? Billy lives in a forest with his friend and family moths, all right? Billy's family are all brown, but Billy is white. So there's a gene for brown pigmentation, let's call it melanin for now, and Billy's gene has had a mutation or a spelling mistake, so it doesn't work. Okay, and so Billy is basically an albino moth. I don't even know if I said that right. Is it albino or albino? Now, the forest that Billy lives in has a lot of white moss that grows on the trunk of trees. And if you're not sure what moss is, it's a plant that kind of looks like cotton fluff. So all the tree trunks in this particular part of the forest that Billy lives in, all of the tree trunks are white because of this white moss that's on them. Now, one sad day, Billy and his family are chilling on a tree trunk, and a bird swoops in and eats all of his family, right? Because they're all brown, and against the white background, it's very easy to spot, and the bird swoops in and eats all his family. But because Billy is white, right, he's camouflaged, and the bird doesn't see Billy, so Billy is able to live on. And he starts a family of his own, and he passes on his genes to another generation. And over time, Billy has started a new species, the white moth species. Okay, so this is a great example of a made-up theoretical story of how random mutations and natural selection can work. Here's the sign that God exists, all right? Here's the proof. Either you believe the story that every single one of the 8.7 million species on this earth, all of the fascinating creatures that you see, were all created by random mutations, random mistakes in the DNA, and natural selection, like we talked about earlier. Or you can accept the obvious truth that someone far more intelligent and capable than us created life on Earth. It's a free country. You can believe whatever you want, but, well, I think it's pretty obvious.